How could an entire family, along with their gleaming silver trailer, vanish without a single trace? No skid marks on the highway, no signs of a struggle at the campground, no calls for help in the middle of the night. Just silence. One moment they were on the open road, planning a getaway like countless other families do every summer, and the next they were gone, erased from the map as if they had never existed. It is the kind of disappearance that chills you because it feels impossible, and yet it happened. The shock rippled through their community, leaving friends and neighbors searching for answers that never came. At first, it seemed like the mystery would soon be solved. Surely someone had seen something. Surely there would be a lead, a clue, a slip of evidence pointing the way. But as days turned into months and months stretched into years, the silence only grew heavier. This isn't just a story about a crime. It's about the haunting weight of uncertainty, about the questions that echo in the hearts of those left behind. Tonight, we'll retrace every step, every clue, and uncover the truth hidden beneath 14 years of mystery. They were, in many ways, the picture of an ordinary American family. Richard, the father, worked long hours at a factory job that kept food on the table and gas in the tank. He wasn't the loudest man in the room, but he was steady, the kind of dad who could fix a broken lawnmower on a Saturday morning and still find time to take his kids out for ice cream in the evening. His wife, Belinda, was the heart of the household. She carried the weight of daily routines with a quiet grace, packing school lunches, balancing bills, and making sure birthdays felt special even when money was tight. Together, they had built a modest life, one that didn't make headlines but radiated the warmth of stability. Their children brought light to that world. David, at 10, was curious and adventurous, the kind of boy who left muddy sneakers at the back door because he couldn't resist exploring creeks and climbing trees. His younger sister, Rochelle, just 7, adored her dolls and kept a journal filled with colorful drawings of flowers and houses, a reflection of her innocence. The family's old silver trailer, polished until it shone in the sun, symbolized more than just a vehicle. It was their ticket to small adventures, to camping trips that broke up the routine of everyday life. They weren't wealthy, but they had each other, and that bond was worth more than anything money could buy. It was those little details that made them real, human, and heartbreakingly relatable. Belinda loved postcards. She would buy one at every stop along their trips, scribbling quick notes about the weather or something funny the kids had said before mailing them back to her mother. Richard carried a small locket on his keychain, engraved with the initials of his wife and children. It wasn't fancy, but it was a reminder of what mattered most to him. Even the trailer had its quirks, a squeaky door that never closed right, curtains stitched by Belinda herself, and a cupboard filled with marshmallows and chocolate for the kids' favorite treat, s'mores by the campfire. These fragments of their lives painted a picture of a family deeply rooted in love and simple joys. But beneath the surface of their ordinary routines, subtle shadows began to form. In the weeks leading up to their disappearance, friends noticed that Richard seemed distracted, burdened by thoughts he wouldn't share. He had complained about feeling watched once or twice, brushing it off as paranoia. Belinda, too, had hinted in a letter to her sister that she was tired more than usual, though she didn't explain why. Nothing in their lives pointed to danger. They weren't mixed up in crime, they didn't have debts, and they weren't the kind of people to make enemies. And yet, small things felt off. On the day they left, neighbors remembered how strangely quiet it was as they packed the trailer. Normally, David would be racing his bike up and down the street, and Rochelle would be tugging at her mother's hand, chattering about what toys she could bring. But that morning, the children stayed unusually close to their parents, subdued in a way that made little sense at the time. One neighbor recalled Belinda's smile. It was polite, but not as bright as usual, as though she was trying to hide unease behind her lips. Foreshadowing is always clearer in hindsight. At the time, no one could have guessed that this trip would be their last. But looking back, the pieces form a darker picture. A father weighed down by unspoken concerns, a mother quietly exhausted, children unusually subdued, and a silver trailer hitched to a truck heading toward a destination they would never return from. In stories like this, it's easy to get lost in the sensational headlines, the chilling aftermath, the police reports and discoveries. But before any of that, before their names were tied forever to a mystery that would span years, they were simply a family chasing small joys on an open road. And it's in those intimate details, the postcards, the marshmallows, the squeaky trailer door, that we see the full tragedy of what was lost. This wasn't just about a crime. It was about people, ordinary and real, whose lives were cut short in a way that defied all logic, leaving only questions and heartache in their place. The last confirmed sighting of the family seemed unremarkable at first, the kind of moment that would normally slip into the background of everyday life. On a warm Friday morning, their truck and trailer were spotted pulling out of the neighborhood, the silver siding catching the light as it rolled toward the highway. A neighbor, watering her garden, remembered Belinda giving a small wave from the passenger seat. It was the sort of wave that carried politeness more than joy, as if her mind was elsewhere. The children were visible in the back, their faces pressed to the glass, not quite smiling, not quite sad, just quiet. That silence, in hindsight, would come to haunt everyone who had seen them that morning. Hours later, the truck was recorded on a gas station security camera about 40 miles away. Richard stood by the pump, filling the tank, while Belinda took the kids inside to buy snacks. The footage showed them walking through the aisles, David carrying a bag of chips, Rochelle clutching a small candy bar. Nothing about the scene raised alarms. They looked like any other family preparing for a road trip, weighed down only by the heat of the afternoon. Yet this would be the last time anyone outside their family circle would ever see them alive. When days passed with no phone calls, no postcards, and no sign of their return, unease began to creep in. The silver trailer, once a familiar fixture of their small adventures, turned up abandoned on a lonely patch of land, miles from the highway. The scene was unsettling, not because of what was found, but because of what was left behind. Inside the trailer, investigators discovered belongings neatly arranged, as if the family had intended to return at any moment. A half-eaten bag of marshmallows sat on the counter, a deck of playing cards lay scattered across the table, and in one corner, Rochelle's notebook remained open, a child's unfinished drawing staring back in silence. There were other fragments of normal life frozen in time. Belinda's purse rested on a chair with her wallet and ID still tucked inside. Richard's toolbox was secured in its usual spot. Even their clothes, folded and stacked, suggested no rush to leave. But the family themselves were nowhere to be found. It was as though they had stepped out for just a moment and never returned, their presence erased, but their lives still hanging in the details they left behind. The discovery rattled their loved ones. For the parents and siblings left waiting, the initial shock gave way to desperate explanations. Perhaps the truck had broken down and they had gone searching for help. Maybe they had gotten lost on a trail nearby. Friends organized searches through wooded areas and along dusty back roads, hoping to stumble upon footprints or discarded items that might point to their direction. But each effort ended in frustration, the silence stretching into something heavier, more ominous. In the community, rumors began to swirl. Some whispered about accidents, others about foul play, while a few wondered if the family had chosen to vanish on purpose, running from a secret no one had known. The abandoned trailer became a focal point of speculation, a chilling symbol of lives interrupted mid-sentence. Neighbors drove by just to look at it, the shiny silver siding now marked with fingerprints of investigators, a reminder that the family's story had shifted from ordinary to unexplainable in the span of a weekend. For those closest to them, the uncertainty was unbearable. Belinda's mother checked the mailbox every day, hoping for one of her daughter's postcards that never came. Richard's brother left messages on the answering machine long after he knew no one would call back. The children's friends at school asked questions no adult could answer, their innocence colliding with a mystery that seemed too large, too dark to comprehend. The immediate reactions of family, friends, and neighbors revealed the deep human cost of disappearance. It wasn't just about missing persons on a police report. It was about empty chairs at dinner tables, birthdays that passed without laughter, and a lingering fear that safety was more fragile than anyone had imagined. The search for answers had only just begun, but already the case had left its mark. A family had vanished, leaving behind only fragments of their ordinary life, and a community was left to wrestle with the most chilling question of all. How could 4 people simply cease to exist without a trace? The investigation into the disappearance began with urgency and hope. When word spread that the family had not returned home, the local sheriff's office mobilized quickly. Officers traced the last known movements, beginning with the abandoned trailer that had been discovered days earlier. Search dogs were brought in, weaving through the tall grass and circling the perimeter for a trace of human scent. Helicopters scanned from above, their spotlights sweeping across the fields at night, a stark contrast to the quiet rural landscape that rarely saw such commotion. Volunteers from nearby towns soon joined the search. Teachers, construction workers, retirees, and even college students gathered, forming long lines to comb through fields, ditches, and wooded patches. They carried flashlights, maps, and a determination fueled not just by duty, but by empathy. The family wasn't just a name in the news, they were neighbors, classmates, customers at the local grocery store. Their absence was personal. News crews arrived as well, their cameras capturing the faces of worried relatives, the fluttering missing person posters taped to lampposts, and the growing sense of unease that had settled over the community. But as days turned into weeks, the search began to feel like chasing shadows. The first major setback came from a reported sighting at a rest stop nearly 200 miles away. A truck driver claimed he had seen a man who resembled Richard with 2 children in tow. Authorities rushed to the area, only to discover it was a different family traveling on vacation. Another tip led police to a motel off the interstate, where someone had checked in under a name strikingly similar to Belinda's. Yet when investigators arrived, the guest turned out to be unrelated. A simple clerical error had fueled the rumor. These false leads began to mount, creating frustration and exhaustion among investigators. Each call brought a spark of hope, only to end in disappointment. For the family waiting at home, the emotional toll was devastating. Every ring of the phone felt like it could be the moment of truth, and every letdown carved the wound a little deeper. The investigation, once fueled by adrenaline, began to slow under the weight of uncertainty. Still, the search for answers pushed forward, and forensic work became the anchor when leads failed. The abandoned trailer was swept thoroughly, inch by inch. Crime scene technicians photographed the interior, collected fingerprints, and dusted surfaces for DNA traces. Curiously, no signs of struggle were found. No broken glass, no blood, no overturned furniture. Instead, the trailer looked almost staged in its ordinariness, as if someone had pressed pause on daily life and walked away. Investigators scoured through the family's belongings, hoping for insight. Belinda's journal, tucked away in a drawer, revealed entries that were at once tender and troubling. She wrote about her children's laughter, her hopes for a new start, but also vague references to fears she couldn't name. Richard's work notes, found in a toolbox, suggested financial stress and an urgent need to fix things before it's too late. These fragments didn't solve the mystery, but they hinted at tensions simmering beneath the surface of an otherwise ordinary household. Security camera footage from the gas station remained the strongest visual clue. Analysts replayed it frame by frame, noting the expressions, the interactions, the body language. Nothing appeared overtly alarming, but Belinda's subdued demeanor and the children's quiet presence raised questions. Witness interviews added further texture. A clerk remembered Belinda asking for directions in a low, uncertain voice. A neighbor recalled hearing raised voices late at night the week before they left. None of it formed a complete picture, but the fragments created a sense that something was unraveling long before the disappearance. The weight of the investigation grew heavier as the weeks turned to months. The initial frenzy of search efforts had faded, the false leads had drained morale, and the forensic evidence, while intriguing, offered more questions than answers. For the community, the mystery was no longer just a case file. It was a shadow that lingered over barbecues, school events, and church services. For investigators, the disappearance had become an obsession, a puzzle that defied resolution, and for the family's loved ones, it was a wound that refused to heal. The investigation was far from over, but one truth had already settled in. Whatever happened to that family would not be solved easily. Every effort, every clue, and every misstep underscored the chilling reality that sometimes people can vanish in plain sight, leaving behind only fragments, questions, and a silence that grows louder with time. For months, the case seemed frozen in place, a story without an ending. But just when the trail appeared to have gone cold, a single overlooked detail shifted everything. The breakthrough came not from a dramatic chase or a stranger's confession, but from a box of evidence that had been sitting quietly in the corner of an evidence room. Inside was a stack of receipts collected from the gas station where the family had last been seen. One of them bore Richard's signature, but what caught investigators' attention was a second receipt from the same day this one, with a timestamp just 15 minutes later. It showed a purchase made with Belinda's credit card at a hardware store 30 miles away. The discovery opened a crack in the narrative. If Belinda had been at that store, she was alive and moving after the gas station stop. Security footage confirmed it. Grainy video showed her entering the hardware store alone, glancing over her shoulder as if she were checking to see if someone had followed her. She bought a lock, a flashlight, and duct tape items that made sense only in a context that investigators were desperate to uncover. This revelation forced the case into a new light. For months, the theory had been that the family disappeared together, vanishing in unison, but the receipt suggested otherwise. Belinda might have separated from Richard, if only for a short time. And if that was true, then the disappearance wasn't a single event. It was a sequence of moments, each one carrying its own secrets. As investigators dug deeper, more hidden truths began to emerge. Interviews with Belinda's close friend painted a picture of a woman under immense strain. In late-night conversations, she had confided about fears she couldn't name, about Richard's increasing volatility, about the weight of financial troubles pressing down on their marriage. She spoke about her children with a tenderness that revealed both her love and her desperation to protect them. The journal entries that once seemed cryptic suddenly aligned with these confessions. Belinda had been planning something, whether it was escape, confrontation, or something else entirely remained unclear. The truth, however, was not solely about Belinda. Investigators learned that Richard had a history he rarely spoke of. Records uncovered an arrest from years earlier for fraud, a case that had been quietly dismissed. Former co-workers described him as charming but secretive, a man who kept his personal life hidden behind jokes and half-truths. Financial records now revealed overdue debts, hidden loans, and unexplained withdrawals. The facade of stability that the family presented to the outside world had been crumbling long before their disappearance. And then came the confrontation, the moment when suspicion turned into something undeniable. A witness stepped forward after months of silence. He was a truck stop attendant who had initially dismissed his memory as unimportant. But late one night, after watching yet another news segment about the missing family, he contacted investigators. What he recalled was chilling: a heated argument between Richard and Belinda in the parking lot of his station just hours after she was seen at the hardware store. Belinda was pleading, her voice strained and urgent, while Richard stood rigid, his fists clenched at his sides. The children sat silently in the back of the trailer, their faces pressed against the window. The testimony shook the case wide open. Suddenly, the narrative of a family swallowed by mystery shifted into something far darker, a tale of conflict, fear, and choices that had spiraled beyond control. Investigators confronted Richard's brother, who had been cooperating from the beginning, with the new evidence. His reaction was telling, a mix of shock, guilt, and resignation. He admitted that Richard had called him late on the night of the disappearance, his voice unsteady, asking for help, and warning him to forget what you know. What emerged was not a neat resolution, but a web of truths too heavy to ignore. Belinda's attempt to break free, Richard's desperate efforts to maintain control, and the family caught in the crossfire of a life unraveling all of it, painted a story far more complex than anyone had expected. The revelation did not answer every question, but it did something more powerful. It stripped away the illusion that this was a simple mystery. It forced everyone, investigators, the community, even the audience following the case from afar, to confront the haunting reality that behind every disappearance lies a tapestry of hidden fears, fragile hopes, and human flaws that can no longer remain in the shadows. For months, whispers and theories filled the void where facts should have been. Then, one autumn morning, the silence broke. A team of hunters, trekking through a stretch of dense woodland nearly 40 miles from where the trailer had been abandoned, stumbled upon something that froze them in place. At the base of an old oak tree lay a bundle partially buried beneath leaves and soil. When authorities arrived, the discovery became undeniable. Human remains, wrapped in a torn blanket, were carefully unearthed. The items found alongside children's shoes, a bracelet Belinda's sister immediately recognized, fragments of duct tape left no doubt that the long search for the family had taken a grim turn. The scene was documented with painstaking care. Forensic experts combed the area, photographing every twig, every indentation in the earth, every fiber clinging to the fabric. The remains told a silent but powerful story. The positioning of the bodies suggested haste, panic, and a desperate attempt to conceal the truth rather than a carefully planned burial. Investigators knew at once this was no accident, no case of a family simply wandering into danger. This was deliberate, violent, and personal. The shocking discovery forced the case into its darkest chapter. Forensic analysis soon confirmed what investigators feared. The injuries showed signs of blunt force trauma and restraint. Belinda's remains bore defensive wounds, heartbreaking evidence of a final struggle. The children's remains revealed no chance of escape. It was not just a disappearance anymore, it was a murder scene, concealed in the woods, waiting to be uncovered. Attention turned swiftly to the one figure whose shadow had hung over the case from the start: Richard. The receipts, the arguments, the witness testimony, all of it pointed in his direction. The discovery of the bodies sealed it. When confronted, Richard could no longer evade the weight of the evidence. At first, he denied everything, claiming his family had left him and that he knew nothing of their fate. But under pressure, cracks formed. His stories shifted, contradictions multiplied, and soon the picture became clear. Investigators pieced together the grim sequence. Richard, overwhelmed by financial ruin and determined to maintain control, had confronted Belinda when she tried to break free. The argument spiraled, escalating into violence. In that desperate night, choices were made that could never be undone. The hardware store receipt, the journal entries, the testimony at the truck stop, all had been fragments of a puzzle that, once complete, revealed a tragedy born from fear, pride, and the inability to let go. When Richard was finally unmasked as the perpetrator, the revelation devastated the community. To neighbors, he had been the man who waved from his porch, the father who played with his kids in the yard. To colleagues, he was the quiet but capable worker. The idea that the same man had carried out such brutality against his own family was almost unbearable. Reporters captured the faces of townspeople gathered outside the courthouse: shock, grief, and a quiet fury that someone they knew could commit an act so monstrous. For Belinda's relatives, the confirmation was both a relief and a new kind of heartbreak. They had begged for answers, prayed for resolution, but nothing could prepare them for the truth. To know that their loved ones had suffered at the hands of someone they trusted shattered their sense of safety. Vigils were held in the town square. Candles flickered against the night. Names were spoken aloud, and tears flowed freely. Teachers remembered the children's laughter in the classroom. Friends recalled Belinda's kindness, her small gestures of warmth that now carried immeasurable weight. The emotional impact rippled outward, far beyond the small community. For many who had followed the case through television screens and news articles, the story became a symbol of how fragile life can be, how even the most ordinary families can hide storms behind closed doors. It forced difficult conversations about domestic violence, about the silent burdens carried in households that appear outwardly normal, and about the tragic cost of secrets left unspoken. In the end, the climax of the case was not just the shocking discovery in the woods or the unmasking of Richard as the perpetrator. It was the collective grief that followed the realization that an entire family story had ended in violence, leaving behind only echoes of what could have been. The tragedy was not confined to a crime scene. It lived in the empty chairs at dinner tables, the unfinished school projects, the birthdays that would never be celebrated. And it left a community forever changed, struggling to understand how such darkness could grow so close to home. In the end, the trial gave the appearance of justice. Richard was convicted, sentenced to spend the rest of his life behind bars, and the community breathed a cautious sigh of relief. Yet for many, it did not feel like justice at all. No sentence could restore the lives that had been lost, nor erase the horror of what had unfolded in those final hours. The gavel strike may have closed the case on paper, but it could never truly close the wounds left behind. Even now, questions remain. Did anyone see the signs early enough to stop what happened? Could Belinda's quiet pleas for help have been heard more clearly, or was tragedy always inevitable once fear and control took root? The haunting truth is that some mysteries do not lie in the facts we uncover, but in the spaces where human choices leave us wondering what might have been. For the families who mourn, and the community that still lights candles in their memory, the story will never fade completely. It lingers as both a warning and a plea, to look closer, to listen harder, and to never ignore the shadows that sometimes hide in ordinary homes. And now I leave the question with you. Do you believe justice was truly served?